You asked. That's my fucking answer. I got the club, a drops operation to run my own thing. Guy like me. Getting all that?
The Penguin is easily one of the best comic book-based pieces of media I have ever seen. At the core, its most praiseworthy property is its excellent writing, from its characters to its dialogue to its plot and its pacing. To me, the most fascinating aspect of the writing was how the series managed to so flawlessly write a villainous sociopath as a protagonist. While morally gray or outright immoral characters aren't uncommon in modern media, the Penguin manages to go a step beyond with its protagonist, Oz Cobb, because throughout, it manages to strike a perfect balance. Throughout its 8 episodes, it manages to take our perceptions of the character on a roller coaster ride, from sympathy and some semblance of understanding to full-on hatred and repulsion. But what's even more fascinating about the Penguin is that it uses this very effective technique of playing around with audience perception in regards to another character as well, that being Sofia Falcone. Oz and Sofia's arcs throughout this show mimic each other in many ways, and yet the way each is presented for us as viewers to perceive follows an almost completely opposite path. In episode 1, we're reintroduced to Oswald Cobb after the events of the Batman, with us as viewers already having a predisposition to disliking the character, given that he's an infamous Batman villain and given that we saw his actions in the movie. Throughout the episode, however, Oz is slowly deconstructed and given depth. It seems like we start to see things from his perspective. No longer is he a secondary character and antagonist to a hero like Batman. No, this is instead his own story, and obviously this affords him with a great amount of added depth that expands him from the caricature of a villain into a full character of his own regard. This starts when Penguin talks about his goals and aspirations by mentioning a story from his youth about a gangster, Rex Calabrese, and how he always took care of the neighborhood in some sense and gave to those less fortunate. We get an idea of Penguin's supposed end goal, the kind of man he wants to be or claims to want to be, and it starts painting an image of him which is later expanded throughout the show, the image of a low-class underdog, scrapping and fighting and doing whatever is necessary to make his way throughout the world and to provide for those he cares about. It's almost admirable, but from the get-go, we also see his more monstrous tendencies. When Alberto Falcone, the new boss of the Falcone crime family, mocks Penguin as a subordinate and makes fun of his goals, Penguin snaps and kills him. With this, we've also seen the insecure, impulsive, psychotic side of the character. But the rest of the episode continues to give us possible reasons to give him a chance, with instances like when he spares Victor and gets him to work with him, and when we see him visit his mother and we realize he cares for her greatly, and most importantly, in the final scene with Victor as they drink slushies and their partnership starts to form. On the other side of things, we also meet Sofia Falcone, who has recently been released from Arkham. To us, she's introduced as the Hangman, a psychotic serial killer, and the coldness of her demeanor and her odd behavior seem to further emphasize that she is indeed what everyone makes her out to be. For now, she's kind of an antagonist in Oswald's story, and we see her through that lens, making us lean towards Oswald's side of things in the general matter. Episode 2 continues the same path. Once again, we're presented with a full picture of who Oswald is through his actions. We see his opportunistic, do whatever it takes mentality through his planning with Maroni and his way to adapt the circumstances to his advantage. We see his more emotional side when he once again visits his mother to realize that her dementia is getting worse. And then we see the monster unveil itself when he ruthlessly kills Irvad, the man he was meant to save, in order to save his own self and to better adapt to the situation that he's in while stuck in the Falcone mansion. We also see more of him and Victor, with Oswald threatening Victor with death if he messes up again, and yet sparing him. It comes off like a tough, loving mentor who wants Victor to grasp the severity of the lives that people like them must live in order to survive in the world. Meanwhile, Sofia's character starts to expand a little as well, as we see the way her uncle Luca, the new boss of the family, regards her with little respect, and how the whole family disregards her and pushes her out of the business. For Oswald, there's always this delicate balance. He's never sympathetic enough that we support him wholeheartedly, because we can still see that he is a violent criminal. But at the same time, at times it feels like we can understand him. He feels a human, a very flawed human, but a human nonetheless, and not just a mindless, mustache-twirling villain. Sofia also evolves from the caricature we saw in episode 1, becoming a fully fleshed out character who we realize has her fair share of problems, and is cast out in a sense by her own family. These notions are expanded upon episode after episode. In episode 4, we finally see Sofia's backstory, her history with Oswald, how he betrayed her, how she was actually innocent and ostracized by her entire family, and how she was basically tortured at Arkham. We also realize that she was actually a good person prior to all of that, working to make actual positive change in the world. The caricature fades entirely, and she's now fully human. Even when she gasses her entire family at the end of the episode, sparing only the little Gia, it doesn't repulse us as much as it should, because we can see the evil of her family and the amount of suffering they put her through. Once again, a balance is maintained between, on the one hand, sympathy, understanding, and humanity, and on the other hand, the repulsion to violence, sociopathy, and crime. In episodes 5 and 6, the roller coaster of perception equalizes, and it seems like both Oswald and Sofia have been fleshed out to a degree where we as viewers have a semi-full picture of who they are as characters. And it becomes hard to root for either one. They both continue to do both sympathetic acts and unforgivable acts, further emphasizing them as dangerous criminals who are simultaneously human. This happens as they both grow their empires separately, while their inevitable clash brews in the background. A great change in perception finally comes about in episode 7, where we learn that Oswald, as a child, had trapped his siblings, his brothers, in a sewer tunnel, causing them to drown. Previously, we'd known that Oswald had lost his siblings, but it was implied that it was a byproduct of their tough upbringing in the city. Here, we realize that he is the cause of this, having done it impulsively after a game of hide-and-seek had gone wrong and caused them to anger him, and in an attempt to keep his mother's love and attention all to himself. This tips the scale on Oswald as a character. It's hard to still understand this character when such a foundational part of his backstory has been dismantled. All this while, he was an underdog who struggled to make it in a city that gave him no chances, no opportunities, and constantly beat him down, a city that had taken his brothers from him and forced his mother to have a rough life. But now, things appear different as we realize that much of this is lies and manipulation, and that Oswald had clear sociopathic tendencies since his youth, tendencies that made him kill his own brothers. It no longer feels like Oswald's behavior and crime are a byproduct of his environment and situation, but rather a byproduct of the sociopathy. We further lose faith in this character when in the last moments of the episode, he opts to leave his whole crew to die in order to escape from Sofia's car bomb, thus showing us that maybe he never really even cared for all these like-minded underdogs who he'd formed a bond of understanding with. On the other hand, in the same episode, we have an almost opposite reaction with Sofia. When she visits Gia, the little girl who she spared when she gassed the entire Falcone household, she realizes that in her attempts to spare this girl the struggles of living amidst such a violent, hateful family, she'd ended up hurting her all the same and becoming just like the monsters who turned her this way. It's a moment of painful self-awareness, and Sofia is almost ready to abandon her life of crime and power and just escape before Julian Rush convinces her to go through with things. At this point in the story, while both Oswald and Sofia are obviously terrible, it's easier to lean more towards Sofia. Oswald was losing his good graces, while Sofia's self-awareness was making her ultimately more human between the two. With Oswald, we'd been deceived into seeing false good traits, which slowly start to unravel to reveal the pure monstrosity beneath. While with Sofia, it's the opposite. She starts off built up to be this psychopathic monster, and then we slowly start to see her true origin and what made her this way. We see the genuine difficulties that turned her bad, and that makes us somehow sympathize with her, or at the very least, somewhat understand her. This culminates in the final episode. Throughout the finale, we get some more awful shit from both Sofia and Oz. Sofia threatens to cut off Oz's mom's finger if he doesn't admit to having let his brothers die when they were young. Oz doesn't admit it, even with his mom almost losing her finger, showcasing that maybe Sofia is is right and that Oz never really did care all that much about his mother. After Oz escapes, Sofia basically offers up her whole criminal empire to whoever manages to capture him, wanting to leave all this behind and move on with her own life. It's an episode that leaves you confused on where to stand, on who to support, on if you should support either at all. The past few episodes have been slowly showing more and more of Oz's horrible traits, and yet, in this episode, because of him, the deputies of all the gangs cause an uprising, taking over the gangs from their leaders. After Link turns against his own boss, he hands Sofia over to Oz. As he takes her for a ride to presumably kill her, he explains how he basically gave all those gang deputies a chance to be seen, to no longer be the underdog eating shit from their bosses. She mocks him, calling him man of the people, to which he agrees that he is.
That's what you need to believe, huh?
She says, but he has no response. This facet of Oz's character that Sofia highlights here is one that had been played on from the beginning of the show to make us as the audience have some semblance of sympathy and understanding for him. But at the same time, in the last episode, we did see him abandon his own crew to evade the bomb on his own. So we know that maybe he really isn't as loyal to his fellow underdogs as he claims to be. Sofia throws doubt upon that notion here, and for good reason, because it seems that at this point in the show, for us as an audience, it's his only saving grace. Instead of killing Sofia, Oz allows her to get captured by the police, being taken back to Arkham, back to the very hell that shaped her into the monster she'd become. It's an awful fate for a character who was once truly innocent. And then we see the culmination of Oz's character arc, or more the reveal of his true character. He sits with Victor, pondering his mother's vegetative state. Vic says that Oz is like family to him now, thanking him. And Oz, citing family as weakness, chokes Vic to death, tossing away his driver's license into the water and stealing his wallet, letting him die in obscurity. Meanwhile, Oz has attained the power he's always coveted, living in a penthouse with his mother still in an awful state of health, but placed in the penthouse overlooking the city. A way for Oswald to convince himself that somehow he gave her what she wanted. With these last two scenes, whatever little goodwill we had for Oswald is obliterated. With his killing of Vic, he proves Sofia right. He was never really about the people, the little man, the underdog. He was always just about himself, but he said what he needed to say to get by and to get people to join his cause. But once he was no longer of the people, he no longer cared about them. Oswald truly was, for the most part, always a monster. Effectively, Oz and Sofia's stories function in reverse. As our protagonist, we begin the show seeing things from Oz's perspective, and we're caught up in his deceptive charm. He feels more human and we want to root for him. Sofia is introduced as some sort of antagonist, and we know little about her save for her cold demeanor and Oz's wariness of her, so we regard her with similar distrust. But as the show goes on, it starts to balance its runtime between Oz and Sofia, allowing us to see the deceptive facade break for Oz while simultaneously allowing us to see the truth behind the cover of coldness in Sofia. And by the end of it, Sofia is fully self-aware that she reinforced the cycle of hatred that her own family inflicted upon her, turning herself into the very thing she tried to avoid. And for that, she decides to get her revenge on Oswald, but then leave it all behind. Unfortunately, however, she suffers a much more tragic fate, being sent back to Arkham, almost as if back in the original loop that had destroyed her life. For her, crime does not pay. As for Oswald, it's the opposite. He deludes himself further and further. It feels like he wants to believe that he has morals, principles, that he's a man of the people, that he's done everything for his mother. But by the end, we see that he doesn't care about the underdogs of society. And while he does care about his mother in some twisted, warped sense, it's mostly just in a sense that would feed his own need for validation and attention from her. He doesn't become self-aware like Sofia. Instead, he embraces his monstrosity entirely, while still trying to somehow convince himself that he gave his mother what she wanted and that he did everything for her. Materially, he does win, getting the position of power he always coveted, while Sofia rots in Arkham. This is what really caught my eye in this show, how interesting both Oz and Sofia are as characters, and the way their character arcs seem to flow in opposite directions. It's also very interesting to see two villains, but see how different their origins can be. In a sense, family and society broke Sofia, making her into the villain she became. In the case of Oz, he was presumably already a sociopath or psychopath to begin with. While his upbringing and childhood played some role in the matter, it seems like there was something corrupt within him from the very beginning. And the show really does an amazing job showcasing this. I think it really was the perfect way to depict a sociopath like Oz. It allowed us to root for him at first, while still allowing some of the corruption to slip through enough for us to be wary. And by the end of the show, it beautifully managed to shift our perspectives of him, seeing him for what he really is, an absolute villain. The Penguin is a masterclass in writing villains as protagonists because it treads a precarious line. It didn't do the lame, easy thing of making Oz some sort of anti-hero or making him a tragic case of being the product of a faulty society like Phoenix's Joker. No, it retained him as a villain, but used his sociopathic tendencies and charm to make him an effective protagonist that we could be somewhat deceived into rooting for, without ever making him into the type of character that audiences may desire to imitate or be inspired by. And this is a very hard balance to strike, which is why the writing really impressed me. Anyway, thank you for watching. I wrote this video months ago after seeing The Penguin, but never finished it because life got in the way. But I'm glad I came back and finished writing it now, because there really is a lot to appreciate in this show, and its character writing is packed with lessons to learn. Let me know what you thought of The Penguin in the comments below, and take care. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.